Did you know there was a Kirby manga? Actually, there's multiple. Back in 1995, there was a Kirby manga called Kirby of the Stars, The Story of Dedede Who Lives in Poo Poo Poo, created by Hirokazu Hikawa. Hikawa was best known for penning this manga, as well as a manga adaptation of Hudson Soft's Bonk series. This manga series was serialized exclusively in Japan in Koro Koro Comic Magazine. This manga ran for over 10 years, amassing over 26 volumes. Unfortunately, there is no real translation I could find of this manga, so instead, I have to settle for the next best thing. In 2018, Hikawa decided to compile a sort of best-of compilation of the best stories this manga has to offer. This would come to be translated and released in the Americas in 2021, known as Kirby Manga Mania. I have obtained all 6 current volumes of the manga, and we will be reviewing every chapter within. I apologize in advance if the quality of the images is a bit weird. There's no good scans of this manga online, so I had to scan it myself, and I am definitely not a professional. Let's get right into it. But before we do, did you know that we have a merch store where you can buy our shirts, mugs, and stickers? Get them now to enrich your gameplay experience. Anyway, to the review. First up is Volume 1, Chapter 1, Kirby the Loopy Picnic Crasher. King Dedede throws a picnic for himself and all of his friends so that they can watch the cherry blossoms. King Dedede makes sure to ask Poppy Bros Jr. to make sure that no one invited Kirby, since he ruined the last year's picnic by eating everything. Unbeknownst to Dedede, Kirby and Chirby are sleeping in the tree right above their picnic. Kirby notices and starts inhaling all of the food. Kirby begs King Dedede to let him join the picnic, but King Dedede agrees if Kirby uses his stone ability to hold down the picnic blanket the whole time. Kirby ends up hitting Dedede in the face with his stone ability as King Dedede throws an assortment of things at Kirby to get him to leave. One of these was a bottle of what is called Loopy Juice. Kirby gets drunk. Loopy, and starts going on a rampage. He eats all of his friends, tries to rant about life to Dedede over and over and over, sings horrible karaoke, all ending in a talent show which causes Kirby to inhale everybody other than Dedede to show off his 10-copy ability Quick Change Act. Kirby starts crying because no one saw his act, so King Dedede gives him a lollipop to shut him up, not realizing candy makes Kirby invincible. In his craze, Kirby ends up destroying all of the cherry blossom trees that King Dedede wanted to watch. Kirby finally conks himself out as Chirby and Squishy crawl out of Kirby's mouth. Ew. They wake Kirby up, and Kirby is finally sober and realizes that he ruined the picnic. Feeling bad for King Dedede, Kirby inhales a cherry blossom tree to become the new View. You know, going from how Kirby is characterized in most Kirby media, especially Kirby Right Back At Ya, this is such a whiplash. I know I'm just going to have to get used to it because this is an entirely different version of what Kirby is. As for this first chapter, I can't believe Kirby got drunk. I'm not gonna lie, Kirby was a bit much in this chapter. I don't know if the zaniness of this manga is always that much or if it was ramped up because he was drunk, but it seemed like a lot. Also, get used to there being cursed art in this manga. Flipping ahead, it seems like there's a lot of those. At least Kirby seems like he's not that annoying of a guy in the end, becoming the cherry blossom tree that Dedede wanted to see. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 1 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1, Chapter 2, King Dedede Magically Turned Into a Toy. The chapter begins with a lonely, cold, raggedy peasant walking up to King Dedede's castle. They say they've lost their way and they would appreciate some shelter. King Dedede just hurls insults at him. Turns out this man is actually a powerful wizard and, as punishment for his rudeness, Samir transforms King Dedede into a toy. Samir tells King Dedede that he must experience true kindness before all of the leaves fall off of Wispy, or else he will be an ugly toy forever. That's right, it's Beauty and the Beast. Word gets around about King Dedede's transformation and every denizen in Dreamland wants to see him. At first, King Dedede does a quick circle walking in and out of the castle, but then becomes everyone's plaything to laugh and gawk at. Soon enough though, everyone gets bored of King Dedede and decides to move on. King Dedede starts to feel despair as everyone in Dreamland couldn't show him true kindness. He goes to his last resort, Kirby. Kirby sees Dedede and starts treating him like a teddy bear, playing all sorts of games with him and tucking him into bed. During the night, Dedede gets kicked by Kirby. creating one of the most hilarious panels ever. Getting shocked by Kirby's sleep copy abilities and having to withstand Kirby's sleep singing, King Dedede gets fed up and goes to whack Kirby awake. But after seeing how softly he's sleeping, he decides to leave him alone and tuck him in. This act of kindness breaks the spell, turning King Dedede back to normal. The king gets excited and decides to wake Kirby up to show him, but Kirby pulls a Kenshiro and beats the crap out of the king in his tired state, ending the chapter. Now that I'm more used to the vibe of this manga, I can definitely say that I'm starting to like it. There were some genuinely good laughs in this one, like when Kirby kicks King Dedede in his sleep. Hell, Kirby's face when he's woken up is priceless. I'm making that a reaction photo. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 2 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 3, Typhoon Kirby makes landfall in Dreamland. The chapter begins with King Dedede and all of his subjects preparing Castle Dedede by boarding it up. Kirby hears the sound of the hammering and mistakes it for drums and starts partying. King Dedede shouts at Kirby that there is no party. They are preparing for the typhoon of the century. King Dedede starts taunting Kirby, saying that Castle Dedede will do way better in the typhoon than Kirby's house. Kirby goes home to make sure it's secure when he realizes it's able to move just from the force of his blowing. Kirby gets the bright idea to put his house inside of Castle Dedede in order to protect it. Of course, he does it in the most Kirby way possible and breaks a giant hole through Dedede's wall in order to get it there. Kirby decides to help patch the hole in the wall, but ends up just using the castle subjects to do it. Poppy then recruits Kirby to help him board up stuff around the castle to keep it reinforced. Kirby, of course, goes too far and boards up the bathroom. When King Dedede forces his way into the bathroom, he discovers Kirby reinforced the toilet too. As Dedede yells at him, Kirby decides to reinforce Dedede's mouth as well. Kirby decides to stress test the stuff by using his inhale ability, but it causes most of the castle to come crumbling down. Kirby asks how else he could prepare for a typhoon, as Chef Kawasaki says that you must stock up on food and water. Kirby then immediately eats a week's worth of food in an instant. Kirby's also told about safety equipment and decides to test out the hard hats by putting it on Dedede and using his fire ability. The hat definitely stayed intact. Dedede, on the other hand, did not. After all of this hijinks, the typhoon is about to hit Dreamland, and the castle is in no state to withstand it thanks to Kirby. Poppy suggests evacuating, but King Dedede is too prideful to not go down with his castle. Kirby offers to build him a new house, but it ends up being a doghouse. As the typhoon wind starts to hit, Kirby gets the idea to weigh down the castle, so he puts some giant boulders on the castle, making it almost get completely crushed and cave in. Kirby then decides to inhale everything in Dreamland that could possibly fly into the castle during the typhoon. Now that everything is destroyed, Kirby is just about ready for the typhoon. Walkie ends up coming on the news with a weather update, stating that the typhoon made an unexpected turn and will be missing Dreamland completely. Disappointed, Kirby decides to fly him and his house home. King Dedede wants revenge for all of the pain, suffering, and damage he's caused, so he starts beating the crap out of him with his hammer. Kirby starts to feel sick and ends up throwing up every single thing he inhaled all over Castle Dedede, reducing it to a pile of rubble. Kirby offers to help, but Dedede shouts at him that he's done enough. God, this chapter was so fast-paced. Literally every couple of panels was a joke. It was hard to describe the chapter considering just how much was happening. Either way though, this is definitely a pretty funny chapter. The gag with Kirby reinforcing the bathroom and then the toilet actually got a chuckle out of me. The only thing I must point out is that Kirby is just kinda annoying. I get it's a gag manga and Kirby is written to be obliviously stupid, but this one is just going way too far. If you didn't see the panels and were just listening to what I was describing, you would just think that Kirby is just being malicious with how much he destroys in this chapter. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 3 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 4, Body Double Kapar, Protect King Dedede. The chapter starts with Poppy walking in on King Dedede crying at the TV. At first he thinks he's watching historical drama, but he's actually watching tapes of all of the times Kirby has beaten him. Who fucking filmed that? King Dedede wallows in all of the times he's gotten hurt and determines no more. King Dedede has heard that in times of war, kings of nations would have body doubles take their place. King Dedede has enlisted Kapar to be his body double, to go out with Kirby and get beaten for him. Poppy doesn't think Kapar looks anything like the king, but the king sees that as a bit of nonsense. Kirby and Gooey show up to invite King Dedede to play tennis, and Kapar goes out in his stead. King Dedede and Poppy decide to follow them to see how Kapar does. Kirby, Gooey, and Kapar meet up with Rick, Ku, Kine, Nago, Pitch, and Choo Choo, and the animal friends start to get suspicious of Kapar, but he does this to convince them. He's the real deal. As Kapar starts playing against Kirby, he starts losing and Kirby gets cocky. King Dedede gets upset, thinking he'd do better than that. He then trades places with Kapar and actually plays. King Dedede ends up hitting Kirby in the head with a tennis ball, making Kirby lose his temper. He spits a bunch of tennis balls, a bunch of rocks, and a bunch of bombs at the king. Kirby goes to apologize for losing himself, but Kapar takes his place without a scratch on him. The group deems tennis too dangerous and decides to move on to snack time. When they start cooking up potatoes, King Dedede once again switches place with Kapar. King Dedede ends up eating a raw potato, so Kirby decides to help him out by cooking the food in Dedede's mouth. I give this manga an A+ in creativity. Kapar takes his place again and eats Dedede's potato. King Dedede gets upset with how things have been going and decides to call the whole thing off. Kapar says that he doesn't want to switch anymore and uses his cutter ability to cut off the king's face and his own face and do a face-off situation. Both of the Dededes run out claiming that they're the real Dedede. Kirby then determines which one is the real one by hitting one with a hammer. He determines the one with Kapar's face to be the true Dedede. Ku states it's because he is so used to getting whacked by Kirby that he didn't even try to dodge. Kapar, seeing that the ruse is up, decides to switch faces back with the king. Dedede explains what his plan was, and Kirby suggests that they should switch places every once in a while. King Dedede, believing this to be a dream come true, agrees. We finally see Dedede win and beat Kirby, until we zoom out and see that Kirby and Dedede have switched faces, ending the chapter. So far I think this is my favorite chapter. I like that King Dedede's idiocy is what punishes him rather than just Kirby being a menace. I like that King Dedede's idiocy is what punishes him rather than just Kirby being a Dennis the Menace type. This is the first chapter where Kirby isn't that much of an eccentric destructive force, and I kinda like it. The only thing I wish was different was I wish the face switch between King Dedede and Kapar lasted just a tiny bit longer. It felt too fast. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 4 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 5. It's tough being honest. The chapter begins with Gooey sitting on King Dedede's head. The king asks Kirby to get Gooey off of him, but Kirby ends up just sitting on top of the king's head as well. They get so comfortable they both fall asleep. King Dedede gets super annoyed and decides to smash them with his hammer, only really hitting Gooey and himself. Gooey ends up passing out on King Dedede's head, making him stuck and not able to be pulled off. Through thinking of how much he hates Kirby, Gooey ends up saying exactly what King Dedede is thinking. This gets the king into a heap of trouble, tanking his reputation. This all comes to a head when Dark Matter Swordsman of all characters comes down from space and challenges King Dedede to a duel for the control of Dreamland. Kirby decides to put them through marriage counseling and making them talk it out instead of fighting. Of course, Gooey keeps blurting out every insulting thought King Dedede has about Dark Matter, causing Dark Matter to really want to fight him. Just as Dark Matter is about to attack, Gooey comes to and attacks him with his tongue, sending Dark Matter back to space. Gooey gets off of King Dedede's head, leading him back to a normal life. Kirby decides he wants to try and puts Gooey on his head. Gooey just says everything Kirby says, showing everyone that Kirby just says what he thinks, ending the chapter. Now that the chapters are a bit more mellow and slice of life, I'm really liking this. King Dedede just being such a pompous ass in his thoughts was pretty funny. Also, the appearance of Dark Matter was so unexpected and honestly, really cool. I hope we get other cool appearances of villains like these in the future. It was cool having Dark Matter being defeated by yet another form of Dark Matter. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 5 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 6, Spooky Tales. Welcome to Terror Inn. The chapter begins with Kirby, King Dedede, and Poppy traveling to a beach and checking into a hotel. The hotel is owned by Gabon, who checks them into a room. King Dedede and Poppy already get the creeps with this hotel, but Kirby of course is having a grand old time. King Dedede gets spooked by the view of the graveyard and the sounds coming from Kirby's stomach. Kirby decides to see how dinner is coming along, leaving King Dedede and Poppy alone in the room together. Kirby meets up with Gabon and sees the food he is about to serve. Kirby ends up gobbling it all up at once, including Gabon. Poppy gets suspicious of this and leaves to go check on Kirby. Poppy finds exactly what he expected, but Kirby whacks Poppy, begging him not to tell King Dedede. King Dedede gets scared that he's alone and is now hearing screaming and decides to go investigate. Kirby disguises himself as Gabon and serves the king a plate of bones. The skull falls off of Kirby, making King Dedede think that the owner of the hotel is a ghost. Noticing his bigger stature, King Dedede comes to the conclusion that Gabon ate Poppy and Kirby. Poppy comes to and gets his revenge by hitting Kirby. Kirby spits out Gabon and he runs into Dedede. Gabon tells him to give him back his skull, and King Dedede mistakes him for a faceless monster. The chapter ends with King Dedede being bedridden from how scared he got. This chapter kinda felt like half of a story. I feel like not a lot happened in this chapter for it to constitute a story. King Dedede just gets scared thanks to Kirby's hijinks, and then the chapter just ends. It seems too quick for its own good. There really weren't any standout jokes either. I don't think I can say I smiled even a single time while reading this chapter. For a gag manga, that's pretty bad. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 6 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 1, Chapter 7, King Dedede's Robotic Pet Craze. The chapter begins with King Dedede very happily playing with his robotic pet, Furpy. Adeline, Ku, and Kirby are enjoying watching the king play with his cool new toy. King Dedede wants to show off that Furpy can dance when it hears music, so he goes inside of the castle to fetch his music player. Kirby decides that he doesn't want to wait and decides to sing in front of the Furpy, causing it to break into a million pieces. King Dedede comes back and wonders where Furpy is. Thinking fast, Kirby puts on a costume that makes him look like Furpy. Kirby starts acting as the robotic pet and is completely succeeding in tricking King Dedede. While he's distracted, Adeline runs off to try and buy a new Furpy. After a while of doing everything that Dedede wants and not being able to do what he wants, Kirby gets tired of doing this and runs away. King Dedede sees that his robotic pet is gone and starts panicking, putting out missing signs with a reward of 50 cents. Kirby, wanting to buy candy, finds himself and comes back to Dedede. Some of Dedede's subjects almost give up on the ruse, but Kirby spits out a bunch of missiles before they can. King Dedede gets impressed by the technology of his Furpy, and Adeline comes back with a new toy, but she was only able to find a knockoff brand. They switch Kirby with the new toy, and King Dedede sees through the ruse immediately. King Dedede finds Kirby and asks if he's seen Furpy around, and Kirby inadvertently reveals that he has the piece of Furpy with him. King Dedede figures it out and gets told everything. King Dedede decides he's gonna make Kirby pay by treating him like his pet, which just ends up biting the king in the ass when he has to keep feeding him 24/7. I like this chapter a lot too. I'm starting to really like this iteration of King Dedede, not just being an adult who acts like a spoiled child, but more so just the annoying kid in the friend group who loves to show off his toys. It's cool that everyone else is doing this just to spare King Dedede's feelings, and not for any malicious reason. I'm just thinking about how mean everyone in Kirby Right Back At You would be if they were put in this exact situation. Plus, Kirby keeping up the ruse was definitely entertaining to read. Not the funniest chapter, but not the least funny either. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 7 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1, Chapter 8, The Comforts of the 22nd Century. So this is more of a what-if scenario if the denizens of Dreamland lived in the 22nd century, or if you want to be cheeky, what if Haltman won? We begin the chapter with Dedede waking up in the morning with the most extra alarm system in the universe. Fucked up part is that still wouldn't wake me up. King Dedede meets with Poppy and they talk until they get a delivery at the door. They open the box and they were delivered Kirby because in the future, you can deliver people. Did you know that in the early days of the postal system, people used to mail their kids to family members? Just a little fun fact. Kirby demands breakfast and comes to see that the only thing you need to eat in the future is one pill that gives you all the nutrients you need for the day. Kirby, King Dedede, and Poppy decide to go for a walk, but the sidewalks are automatic, but it is very quickly turning into a board game. Kirby's cell phone starts to ring and we see just how tiny cell phones are in the future. Kirby drops it though and they start looking for it like it's a contact lens. It starts to rain, going against what the weather said, showing that not only has weather forecasting not advanced, it's actually gone backwards, being determined by the flip of a shoe. The rain clears up and the gang decides to get a drink, which has a variety of different temperatures like cold, body temp, and dog hot. The gang then go into an arcade to play a realistic fighting game, but all it is just a place to fight where there's virtual health bars above your head. They decide to take a shower, but showers in the future are just washing machines. King Dedede decides he wants to go home, but his automatic security system won't let him in because the king looks slightly different from his picture. This is the end of the chapter. Another schmeh chapter. Just another chapter of picking a subject, doing as many gags as you can with that subject, and then ending the chapter when you're out of ideas. There's no story here, it's just showing what the future in Dreamland would be like, beating up Dedede along the way. No real substance here and really not that funny. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 8 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 9, the heart-pounding, very real game of life. The chapter starts with Kirby, King Dedede, and Poppy going to the toy store together to try and find a game to play. King Dedede gets nostalgic when he sees the game of life in there, and Kirby decides to get it. The shopkeeper says that the board game is actually being recalled and the vendor is coming back to get it, but Kirby takes it anyway. They start playing the board game and already things get weird when the game pieces morph to look like them. Meanwhile, at the game shop, Madhu, the peddler of darkness, comes to pick up his game only to learn that it was given to Kirby and the others. Back at the castle, the gang start the game and then get sucked into the board game. Madhu arrives just as they get sucked in and tells them that they must beat the game to escape. They very quickly learn that whatever it says on the space they land on will actually happen to them. Of course, being a game that is supposed to have bad things happen that wouldn't normally happen to you in real life, they now have to experience all bad things. Well, except for Kirby, of course. Everyone starts getting close to the goal when King Dedede is forced to go back to the start of the game, having to endure the torture all over again. Poppy ends up winning and escaping the game first, and then Kirby right after. After going through another round of torture, King Dedede finally escapes. Kirby, finding the whole experience fun, decides to play the game again, this time to win, sucking them all back into the board game. Ending the chapter. This one was much better. I definitely like the chapters that have a proper story progression instead of just being a vehicle for gag after gag. King Dedede having to go back to the start of the game after almost finishing was so good, and Kirby resetting the game was the perfect ending. Best chapter so far. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 9 gets my rating of an A+. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 10, The Founding of Kirby Land. The chapter begins with King Dedede enjoying a piece of strawberry shortcake. As is his preference, King Dedede decides to save the strawberry for last. Kirby barges in and, thinking that King Dedede was just picking off the strawberry, eats it as to not waste it. King Dedede gets so upset he ends up exiling Kirby from Dreamland forever. All of their friends try to convince King Dedede that he's being too harsh, but Kirby decides he doesn't want to be in a country with such a tyrannical king and decides to make his own country, Kirby Land. Kirby declares independence, having a 10-foot circle drawn around his house, the border being Gooey's tongue. King Dedede laughs it off, and everyone does not want to live in Kirby Land. Kirby tries to sell it to his friends, and after offering to have them live there only for a day, the animal friends decide to play along. They receive membership cards, have to endure Kirby singing, and live tightly within the circle. Kirby decides that it's packed a little too tight and decides to try and expand his territory. King Dedede objects, but their war over land ends pretty quickly, and Kirby ends up stretching Kirby Land over a significant distance. Poor Gooey. King Dedede ends up strengthening border security to make sure no one in Kirby Land crosses over or tries to expand. Kirby realizes there's no restaurants in Kirby Land, so he tries to cross the border to get ramen. Kirby gets searched for dangerous items, and they find ninja stars, bombs, missiles, and drills on him. King Dedede keeps making his country look better and better, making the animal friends leave one by one, the only one left being Koo. Koo gives Kirby the advice to make his country better, but Kirby can't think of any good ideas. The king makes it worse to live in by making Kracko go above it and start raining constantly. Is that Kracko's pee? This causes a war between Kirby and Dedede of trying to make their countries worse and worse to convince people to move out. This results in both countries getting completely demolished and the denizens of Dreamland exiling both Kirby and King Dedede. The chapter ends with them both being on a deserted island that they deem the Kirby and Dedede Republic. This is the type of gag chapter that I like more. There is a clear story and conflict here and isn't just unmotivated gag after unmotivated gag. The conflict between Kirby and King Dedede is petty and entertaining to read. Ending it by Napoleon Bonaparting the both of them was pretty funny. Just an overall good chapter. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 10 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 11. The Big Comeback, Things Kirby Always Wanted to Try. This is a very fourth wall-y breaky one, so be warned, Kirby might try to crawl out of your screen. The chapter starts with the gang celebrating that this is the first new chapter that they've gotten in years, and in Koro Koro and Nikki of all magazines. Kirby decides to be gold to celebrate, not realizing that the manga is black and white, so it doesn't really matter anyway. King Dedede also shows up in a regal new appearance once he sees Kirby do it. Kirby realizes that Koro Koro Nikki is more of a grown-up magazine than their old one, so they try to do some new things. Kirby decides to pig out, the difference being that it's grown-up foods this time. King Dedede, all of a sudden feeling competitive, decides to add a romantic subplot between him and Ribbon. Or him and Kirby. After Kirby realizes that he doesn't want to be with King Dedede, he thinks maybe they can try being a serious manga instead of a gag one. This ends up making Kirby too depressed to continue. Poppy shows up to warn everyone to wrap it up because the artist is getting tired of drawing, so Kirby tries one more thing. A giant 2-page spread. This chapter was cute, nothing groundbreaking, but cute. Fourth wall breaks are my weakness when done right. It can be really funny, and this chapter certainly did it right. Them having to end the chapter because the author was getting tired was actually a pretty funny joke. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 11 gets my rating of an A. That concludes our coverage of Volume 1 of Kirby Manga Mania. We will be doing a brief intermission before hitting Volume 2, so I hope you enjoy these mini dubs by the amazing talent over at the DUBASSES channel.
Hikawa-sensei, I'm here to help, people!
Thanks, Kirby.
First, I need you to look at this.
What's this, a contract? What does this say about all-nighters?
Won't do 'em.
Picking up lunch?
Not me.
Complex backgrounds, like overhead shots, crowds, etc.?
No drawing those.
Finishing touches, blacks and white out?
Lousy at 'em. I'm asking for $1,000 per day with 3 free meals and a nap included.
Beat it!